Seattle, a growing, thriving metropolis, known for jumbo jets, the Space Needle, high tech, and salmon. We are also a city learning that with growth and prosperity comes responsibility. We need to protect what we value most about our city, our land, and our water. As our traffic jams up, as our creeks wash out, as our wildlife and habitat are endangered, we're joining together throughout Seattle as neighbors, public agencies, and businesses to find solutions to these problems. In southwest Seattle, near the Fauntleroy Ferry Dock, a small creek flows clear and sparkling over a sandy bottom. If you walk 100 feet east, crossing Fauntleroy Way southwest, at the right time of year, you'll witness something no one has seen in over 70 years. Salmon returning from the sea to spawn in Fauntleroy Creek. The salmon's return is the result of a partnership of neighbors, private businesses, and community groups. They joined forces with the Seattle Public Utilities and other city departments to restore Fauntleroy Creek. It all began when Judy Pickens had a problem.
My husband and I started paying attention to Fauntleroy Creek in about 1989 out of personal interest. A piece of property across from us and the creek was for sale for development, and we decided that perhaps the creek could save us, and then soon realized that perhaps we could save the creek. It was pretty much a ditch, but it was a ditch that the local people recalled being around, enjoying as a native space.
Judy and her neighbors began to clean up the creek. In the early 90s, she contacted Seattle Public Utilities to enlist their help.
We had been doing a lot of creek work and restoration with the Seattle Conservation Corps all over the city, and so we decided to help her. The watershed has a wonderful park in it, Fauntleroy Park, and so we did most of our work in the park, doing trail work and bridges to help keep folks on the trails and out of the creek.
Judy then connected Fauntleroy Creek with the City of Seattle's Summer Youth Employment Project.
Those young people that first summer did a lot of work stepping the creek along this section, putting in native plants, because it was our best section when we thought about returning salmon. It would provide the best possible habitat.
She also put together additional partnerships to build bridges along the creek trail.
The funds came from our local Washington Mutual branch, just a little community fund that was available there, and that check went to then the West Seattle chapter of Puget Sound Anglers. These are people that like to fish, and so they have a personal interest in the health of the salmon. And so these folk took the check and converted that into 4 bridges. Soon we had school children coming with their fish, initially just coming after school hours, a few students with a teacher, but soon the teachers asked for more. And we started providing a whole morning program when students would come. They would release their fish, they would learn more about the habitat, and they would learn about the first people that camped along this creek. With the coming of the students and the fish they raised in Seattle Public Utilities Salmon in the Classroom program, came some success. In 1994, the first salmon returned. And Harry and Louise got as far as the culvert that goes under Fauntleroy Way, and they could not get further into the habitat that we had really prepared for them.
Once again, Judy Pickens called Seattle Public Utilities. A drainage and wastewater crew put a camera in the culvert to investigate the problem.
Seattle Public Utilities went out and TV'd the pipe and discovered that it was in very deteriorated condition, had begun to undergo structural failure, and was in danger of collapsing. If that had happened, There was a potential to have a major washout of Fauntleroy Way right there where the ferry terminal was, which would have caused major, not only environmental impacts, but also traffic impacts.
The original culvert was put in 1915. I'm showing you a picture of Fauntleroy Way 1914, which at that time there was no culvert. In 1915 the culvert was put in, and in its original condition they didn't pay much attention to the necessity for fish travel. The only concern then was to get the water under the new road. At that time there were lots of salmon in all of the streams around, and nobody gave any thought to the salmon restoration problem.
Our elders, people that I would call Grandma and Grandpa, as children as young as 5 to 10 years of age, would go to creeks throughout this region at the time of salmon returning and be able to walk from one side of the creek to the other with on the backs of the returning fish, thousands and thousands of fish.
The Fauntleroy project was part of a greater citywide effort to reconnect Seattle's citizens with their creeks. Creek restoration helps prevent flooding and erosion. It also restores habitat for local fish and wildlife. This all began in the early 1950s, when a state law was enacted that required fish travel be maintained or enhanced when any creek work was done.
That state law affected the Fauntleroy Creek project in that the culvert originally did not allow fish passage because it was very steep, and so we would have to make it fish passable as we did the new design, and that's what required us to have a fishway at both the upstream and downstream end of the culvert so that fish are able to pass up through the culvert now.
Seattle Public Utilities created the Fauntleroy Creek Culvert Replacement Project Team in 1997. It consisted of department employees with expertise in construction management, drainage design, landscape architecture, and property rights and acquisition. They joined forces with Rosewater Engineering, who would design the new culvert and fish ladders.
The whole process of creek remediation and design and fish passage is really evolving very much so in the last few years with the increased awareness, and we're excited to be among those who are getting on board and finding solutions to make things happen. There is a very active community group which has activities centered around the creek itself. And so, again, from the outset, we worked with the Friends of Fauntleroy Creek to establish what their issues are and how to incorporate those into the design. It was certainly an option to just go right ahead and put in the boxes and do the straight engineering and call it a civil facility and sort of close ears to the complaints. But the city, in my opinion, to their credit, recognized that what they were doing was going to have an impact, and they were very accommodating towards listening to and dealing with the concerns of the community.
Construction began in August 1998. Seattle Public Utilities project managers worked with the contractor to minimize the impact of equipment and work on local traffic and the neighborhood. The project had to be completed in time for the fall runs of returning salmon. The creek was rerouted, earth moved, metal formed, and concrete poured. The creek bed was reconstructed to resemble a more natural environment. Trees and shrubs were planted to provide shade for the fish. Neighbors kept a close eye on the pace of construction.
There were several retired gentlemen that would stand, and they were our sidewalk superintendents, and they would be out there every day watching the construction and asking questions and making sure we were doing what we were supposed to do. And it was really enjoyable just working with the community and working with very interested members of the community.
About the time we were doing the planning for this project, the city's artist-in-residence made a presentation to the Resource Development Division that I work in and talked about the idea of putting art into our projects. So since this was a project that was being created in a place where there was a lot of public access and a lot of community support and close to the creek and out near a street where people would have an opportunity to actually see it, it seemed to me that this was a great opportunity to involve art in this project.
Tom Jay was selected for his artistic ability and special affinity for the salmon. He shared his knowledge of their place in the Northwest culture and ecosystem with the community and the designers. Together, they decided to illustrate the life of the salmon, from eggs to fry and smolt, the journey to the ocean, and the return to spawn and die. In November 1998, 2 weeks after construction was completed, salmon returned to spawn in Fauntleroy Creek.
The completion of this culvert has really surprised us all. The Fishway has made their passage very possible, and they have rewarded us to a degree that we never expected. Since the 1st of November, with the first high tide, we have a return of at least 200 coho salmon to this tiny creek.
I was out there and watched salmon coming back, and it was exciting to see that the way the structure was built, they didn't actually have to leap up over the weirs, but they were able to just swim right up through them. The water just kind of flows real nicely through there, almost like a natural creek for them.
I'd say they were like 17-pounders, good, strong fish. They came up and worked their way up their ladder with one purpose in mind, and that was to procreate.
I'd never seen fish spawn before. It's not that I didn't think that fish would come back, but I didn't know if they would. I thought, if we're doing all of this concrete work and all these pretty major changes to the creek, then you'd think it would change the scent of the creek, because that's how the salmon come back.
My dog and I have come down here probably 3 or 4 days a week, and we counted 89. I talked to one old gentleman here, and he said, I haven't seen fish in here like this since 1911. And so that's restoration.
The environment, the earth, the water is all key in survival of everything. And our elders tell us that if we abuse or destroy it, we too shall lose out. So as we return things back to nature with loving care, as this community has, we see a return and a thriving of many things. And each of these things bring back important key elements to enrich and ensure the environment and the safekeeping of our world and our community. And this is just a small step in the growth of this community. And I thank all of you for your love, your care, and your sharing with Mother Earth and returning back to Mother Earth something so wonderful as the gift of the salmon.
The salmon is our wisdom. And that may sound like an odd thing to say, the salmon is our wisdom. But in a real way it is, because wisdom can't be owned. And wisdom has this incredible, powerful vitality that's mysterious. And salmon embody that. They embody not only the mystery and vitality of this place, the land and the sea, but they say something to us. They say that if you're willing to give your whole life to where you live, you'll be rich, and your children will be healthy.
Restoring an urban stream is a major, major investment. It is not easy. Even this little creek, which is just a mile long, it's turned out to be so far a 10-year investment, and we are not nearly finished. It is something that can be done as you go about your regular life, but it will change you as you get closer to how water works, how streams work, how wildlife works in that kind of habitat. You will learn a lot you will begin to assess how you live on the land. At least that's my experience.